And I feel like I'm already talking too much. I want to hand it off to Carly Shields, your keynote for this morning. So Carly, I guess it's the afternoon now, but Carly Shields is the brand manager at Raw Fury, a multidisciplinary artist and a board game designer. So we're really grateful she's here to talk, and the virtual stage is yours, Carly.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kristen. I just noticed that we have the same haircut.
I know. I always talk about this with people. Like, in your own, you could like put our heads together and make one head of hair.
One full head of hair.
I found my people already. All right, off to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'll introduce myself more in a sec because I've got a presentation that I'm going to show. So let me share my screen. And maybe Kristen, if you could just let me know that it is up before I begin.
I think we're almost there. Not seen it yet. Oh, something's changing. There we go.
Okay, awesome. So yes, hello everyone. Maybe I should actually go to the next slide before I actually get into what this is about. So my name is Carly Shields. I'm actually a Rochester native myself. And I am a brand manager over at Raw Fury Games, which is a Swedish publisher who is hoping to change the publishing game in the way that we interact with our developers. So I used to be the PR manager over there, one of them, and I just recently stepped into a brand role. So it's kind of went from public facing to behind the scenes, which I was very excited about. It's kind of what I wanted to do. So I've been in games marketing for the past 5 years. I used to work at an agency, and I've helped with marketing with a lot of indie games to AAA. So I kind of have a wide breadth of experience in regards to that. It is very strange to me that I actually can't see anyone or interact, because usually I do these talks and I have like a lot of audience participation, but I'm just kind of talking to my own head right now, and it's very bizarre. So you can just see some of the titles that I worked on there. So like large titles like Persona 5 Royals, the Sega Genesis Mini, to smaller stuff that you probably haven't heard of, or, you know, it's a very wide catalog of stuff that I worked on. I've helped launch over 100 games. So if you want to find me on social, I'm at Upgraded Shields. So I want to talk about what this whole thing is going to be about today. So I'm hoping that I get through it fairly fast so that I can field a couple questions at the end. Again, I'm usually like doing audience participation even by this point. So, my talk today is on getting people to care about a game, because it is, you know, it boils down to the very essence of game making and marketing it to people, but it's something that surprisingly we don't think about a lot. And I've had a lot of conversations with developers at this point about, you know, what is their strength? What is the thing that is special about their game? And it surprises me how often people can't just quickly name what that thing is. And so that's what I'm here to do today, is get people to start thinking about that, and you know, get you to a point where people are talking about your game and they find a reason to care. So I will start going through the slides now. So we already did that one. And here are the topics that we're going to cover. So why start thinking about your strengths early, how to figure out what your strengths are. And then I kind of want to talk about things, pulled out my earphones, that indies can do, that you don't, it is very specific to indies, and something that indies can do that maybe AAA can't. So my main focus of this talk is to explain why this process is important, but I also want to give you actual tangible things that you can act on. You know, it's well and good to talk about this kind of thing in a very broad sense, but unless I can give you things to help you and give you tools, it's just kind of, you know, a nebulous thing. So, yes. So let's start here. So why start early? it is increasingly harder and harder to launch an indie game in this market. So Steam alone launches over 100 games a day at this point, and that's only increasing. Every single year it goes up exponentially, and suddenly you are having to compete with so many more games. Like 5 years ago, I could have sent out a press release and got attention about a game. That's not really the case anymore. You have to fight so much harder to get, your share of the consumer market, the publisher market, the media market. So starting this process early is super important, and it's something I stress so much. At ROC Fury, we take on publishers fairly early in their development. So I am very lucky that I get to have this conversation with people like from the very conception of the games. But if you're not thinking about this thing, you're going to get to the end of your development cycle and suddenly you may have this great game, but no one knows about it, no one's talking about it, and you don't know how to talk about it. So I want to make sure people are thinking about this super early, and that kind of rolls into the thing that is dreaded by so many people, which is the elevator pitch. So before I go through the rest of these points, I just want to jump into what an elevator pitch is. So this is your 1 to 2 sentences that can get someone to understand your game or get them instantly interested in your game in a very short time. Like elevator pitch came from, okay, you're stuck in an elevator with a high up exec and you have 30 seconds to get them interested in your project. So I put 3 examples here because they're all of varying lengths. So this one, it's a lovely morning in the village and you are a horrible goose, is one from the Entitled Goose Game. And immediately I'm like, tell me more. This got me super interested in this game and I've played the heck out of it. We have the one from Bug Snacks, which is Bug Snacks takes you on a whimsical adventure to Snacktooth Island, home of the legendary half bug, half snack creatures, Bug Snacks. So, wow, that was a mouthful. This one's a little bit longer, but it still includes things that I'm like, very, they pique your interest. And then there's one that's a little bit more classic. It's kind of the ones that we generally run and write through. Is one for Cuphead, which, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a little bit of a mouthful, but, it really describes the game in a very succinct way that you can immediately understand it and get even just, develop a picture in your head about what this game is, just from these 2 sentences. So I'm not gonna go too much more into depth on how to write these or anything like that, but this is going to be one of your most important things that you need to do super early, and they can change, but you need to be able to really hone in on interesting and important things about your game super early on so you can get this and you can start talking to people about your project. So, all right, here we go. Another reason to start early, indies receive such a small share of video game outlet coverage now that there's not a lot of space out there. These places need to be focused on readership because that's what gets them money and that's what keeps them alive. So, a lot of the time, there's so many indies out there, it's really hard to cover all these. And when I talk about coverage that indies get, I'm also including things like Stardew Valley, which is an indie game. So you're really competing with so many titles out there with, ones with existing notoriety that you need to be able to be able to talk about this in an interesting way and getting people interested in your game super early, because people will remember that. Even if you talk to them and it's been a year, you could talk to them again. And if you've got an interesting pitch or something that you've isolated your strength and you're able to bring up that title again, it will trigger people's memory, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I heard of that, or Or, yeah, you talked to me about that a year ago. How are things going? Like it does happen. It happens all the time. How consumers find their next title have shifted dramatically from press to streamers and YouTubers. So we're talking about the rise of the influencer essentially at this point. And you want to get those people on board early because they're going to evangelize your game almost more than anyone else. So if you can get them interested and like make them part of your marketing plan, like giving them things early or, you know, letting them in on secrets and stuff like that, it can really get them invested in your game. And then they will be talking about their game to your audience and you'll get that organic spread. It is way more likely that people will be interested in a game that they hear about from someone they trust rather than, you know, an anonymous source or someone that they don't know. So, you know, I'm way more likely to play a game that my friend has recommended than anyone else has recommended. And a lot of these influencers have that kind of relationship with their audience where people think of them as friends. So finding those people and talking to them early, super important. This is something I talk about so often. Okay, when you start early, you are able to figure out if your game has a special thing. And I hate to use the word special because it seems like contrite, but I really do find it hard to think of what else that is. So if you can't tell me what is special about your game, you have a problem right from the get-go. So, I mean, I talk broadly because I'm really pushing games that are more commercially viable and stuff like that. If you just have an art project that you're doing because you love it and you need to get it out of you and you need to, you know, just have it developed, this stuff may not be as interesting to you. You know, I will never say don't make something because it isn't commercially viable. But all of this, you know, if you want to start your own indie studio, if you want to make money off of your project, then this is the stuff that's super important to you. And so, yes, start early because I want to know that people are thinking about what they're like bringing, new things they're bringing to the market, what this game has that other games don't have. Why should people care about this game? If it's just, oh, it's a roguelike. Okay, there are so many other roguelikes out there. Why should I play your game as opposed to Hades that has a million, 9 out of 10 reviews out there? So like just really thinking about what you want to hone in on and what is that thing about your game that is super important is super important. So let's go on to the next one. So I have some caveats that I want to drop in here before we really start getting into like where you can start isolating what those strengths of your game are. Let go of ego. And now this one is hard because a lot of people have a hard time thinking that they even have an ego. But you know, no matter what, you are not your game is not you. You want to take a step back because, and this kind of feeds into the next point, is like getting honest feedback is only going to make your game better. Like letting go of how precious this thing is very important. You know, we all, like on any project that you're super close to, you can get way too close to it. And it's like, so I used to go to school for fine art. If you are drawing and you're very close to a drawing, you don't see the imperfections and how you can make it better until you take steps back from that, because perspective is everything in this. So point 2, get diverse feedback. Don't just rely on your friends and family to give you feedback. They are very likely going to try to spare your feelings and maybe not give you an honest look at what your project is or where there are issues that you need to address. So looking at people outside of your gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, sexual orientation, everything. Like, find those people, get them to play and get them to give you feedback. There are going to be things in there that you never realized because you don't have the experience to be able to isolate those things. Find people that have so much experience that is not your own. And I will talk about that and push that as much as humanly possible. Okay, so now I'm going to cover some ways that you can look at your game and pull those strengths or those special things out of it. So there's a bunch of different categories that we can kind of look at, but this is certainly not an exhaustive list, but is one that I want to get people to start thinking about. So let's go to the first one, sound design. Does your game have an amazing soundtrack? Are you doing something new with sound technology that reflects in the gameplay? Are you recording in an interesting way that hasn't been utilized before? And then I just give you an example. This is actually one title that I worked on that the soundtrack was a huge selling point because it was all handcrafted by an IGF nominated composer. So when I say, are you doing something new with sound technology that reflects in the gameplay? This actually, so ROC Fury did a game called Goner that they actually won an award for this because they were doing things with sound that made its way into the gameplay and the mechanics of the game. Again, not an exhaustive list, but like, is your soundtrack good? And it's not even enough to be good. It has to be exceptional. There's only so many stories to be told about anything. So you need to stand out. And so if your soundtrack and if your sound design is one of those things, that is definitely something that you can isolate as a strength and work into your elevator pitch. So next, your development team. Have you done stuff that people know in the past? Do you have a well-known, oh, I made a spelling mistake, ignore that. Do you have a well-known voice actor attached, which only carries so much clout, but it is interesting. We recently had a game that had the same voice actor that was in The Last of Us, that does Joel in The Last of Us. So we got to talk about that a bunch. Is your development team diverse? This is becoming more and more interesting to especially media, because we are looking at diversity in a very different way than we have in past years, like even in the last year. Is there a really interesting story as to why you're making this game? So there's lots of ways to think about your development team as being one of the reasons why your game is special. Now, like, well-known IPs isn't really common in indies so much because we are kind of like jumping from project to project, but you know, it does happen. So just have a think about it. Mechanics. Are you just doing something extraordinarily new with a genre? And I put extraordinarily in there because just doing something a little bit new is not enough. It has to be something super different. And you see the example I gave you was when Braid first came out. Like, it played with time in a way that like no one else kind of tackled. So that is a very good example of mechanics being your biggest selling point. Is your game hard in a good way? Think about Celeste. It got a ton of attention because of how hard it was. And have you designed specifically for accessibility? Again, same with diversity. This is becoming something more and more people are talking about. Are you designing a game so that anyone can play it, whether, you know, no matter what skill level they have or what impediment they may experience in the way that they play the game? This is definitely something very interesting. All right, so I don't want to run out of time too fast, so I'm going to kind of get through the rest. So story. Do you have an amazing story with a well-developed payoff? And again, this is really important to get feedback on, because I find that story is one of the things that people are the most precious about. And it is not necessarily the same, what they have in their head isn't necessarily the same thing as having a story with a good payoff that is interesting to people. So feedback on story is huge. Please get a lot of people to experience story. And it is harder to talk about story every once in a while because you don't want to spoil things, but yeah. Do you have any interesting or well-known story designers on your team, and name their names and what projects they've worked on before? Like if you have the narrative designer of Mass Effect on your team, like that's something to be talking about. That's special. And if you, my example there, would you kindly think of BioShock? And if you played that game, you'll know why I put it there. All right. Art. This one is a lot harder to sell because so many games have really good art, but it is something that you could talk about. Like if you're doing art in a very interesting way, then it is something that could be packaged into your special thing. If you have well-known artists on board that have notoriety, if you have hand-drawn animation, charming art, or limited palettes, something that other games aren't doing is what you really want to be thinking about right here. So if you guys remember a couple of years ago, Gris was one that it was fully hand-drawn animation, and it was extremely delicate. And the art reflected the story in it so well. And like this game got a lot of featuring and attention in that year because of that. So next, we got messaging. And I've included this one last because this was something super important that has very recently, just like diversity, just like accessibility, has become very important. So do you tackle social issues in your game in a thoughtful way that's not just clubbing someone over the head with a brick? Does your game add to a global conversation? Do you have a very personal story in this game that will touch someone or change the perception about a topic? This is something you can definitely push. And it's something that I really hope people really think about and develop more around. A personal story that can pull someone in is going to be spread around organically, probably more than anything else. So Papers, Please tackled immigration issues in a very thoughtful way. So, there are definitely stories to be told around messaging. So I've kind of given you a bunch of tools to think about right here. So there's 6 categories. There are certainly more, but we're limited on time, so I don't want to go too much over. So please use these as a tool to think about what is important to your game. And lastly, I just want to kind of tackle something that people ask about all the time, is what matters to various buckets. And because I work at a publisher, I can speak to this a little bit. And I know that a lot of indies would like to get in at publishers. So things that are important to us, interesting and new mechanics, a history of quality or well-sold titles. Now, this is going to be hard because a lot of people, especially watching this, are going to be in their first project, but that doesn't necessarily preclude you from being picked up by a publisher. Being reliable and be able to hit dates and be professional is very important to us, because we need to make sure that all the work that we put in as publishers will reflect what is going on with the development. Like constant delays are really hard on the publisher itself, because, and I mean, Raw Fury works in a very different way. I assume, I can't speak to other publishers, but we will work with developers on delays and things like that. But it is very hard, and it adds a ton of work when there are delays. And honestly, timing is huge for us. How many catalogs that we have, or sorry, how many titles we have in our catalog, whether we have the bandwidth to take something on, is huge. So I'm not going to touch on the other ones. You guys can read them there. But specifically, I wanted to talk about publishers. Each publisher has a generally, they have a focus on a certain kind of title. So do your research. Find the publishers that are best suited to your title and apply to all of them. We don't expect you to put all your eggs in one basket and just go to us. We would rather you go and apply to as many publishers as possible that are applicable to your title, because that gives you some leverage. If a couple publishers are interested in you, suddenly, you have some negotiating power, and that is huge to us. We are very much advocates for developers getting the best deals and getting the best contract. There's one last slide that I would like to provide a couple of resources to people that are thinking about applying to publishers. We published our contract not too long ago to be able to provide a resource to people that maybe aren't as savvy, so that you don't get caught by predatory contracts. And there are a bunch of them out there. So I had a couple more slides up, but I'm totally out of time. So I will probably put some stuff together and pass them to Rob to be able to share with everyone here. But I hope this was helpful. You can find me at Upgraded Shields on Twitter. Like, if you have a question, feel free to DM me. Like, I've got all this knowledge in my brain. I need to use it for something. So I totally don't mind. If you guys have specific questions in regards to your projects, feel free to ask me. I'm happy to help. So yeah, I guess I'll call Kristen back at this time because I don't want to go so far over. Thanks so much, and have a really good rest of your event.
Thank you so much, Carly. I love this presentation. You've given us a ton of content to work with. And I think that the wonderful theme here is accessibility and just making sure that more people can dive into this. Here's the tools. And the fact that you even highlighted some of the predatory nature of some of this is incredibly important, because we want more people to get into gaming. We want more people to game. We want this to be, a wonderful culture for people to jump in and enjoy.
And
so
if people are looking to go to a publisher for their title, a bunch of publishers have now since published their contracts online as well. So I would highly recommend that people go to YouTube. I can't remember the name of him right now, but there is someone who goes through our contract line by line and breaks it down. And it's not perfect. So it's a really good resource to people that may not be used to contracts. So just look up Raw Fury contract. Oh no, I can't think of what the keywords would be. It might just be Raw Fury contract. Go and watch it. It is super important.
That's awesome. And thank you for providing that and keeping that at top of mind, because it's really easy to get excited about the game and the side of it. It's like, wait, let's make sure that, the most people / everyone can enjoy this with us.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
We did get one question here that I wanted to toss by you real quick. It was basically Ikebon Games asking, what are your honest thoughts on Kickstarter and how the Ikebon Games saying they find that Kickstarter for projects rule the roost, but are rough for designers if you aren't spending a lot of money for press. So how do you feel about this?
Oh, I'm actually very much for Kickstarters. We take on projects that have already gone through Kickstarter, and I believe other publishers do as well. It is not an impediment to also getting a publisher. Kickstarters, they provide a source of income that otherwise would be unreachable to people. I've published a board game and an expansion at this point, and it would not have been possible if it hadn't been for Kickstarter. It would never have happened.
Well, there you go.
We're all, indies. We don't have, starving artists is a thing for a reason.
Right.
So without that tool, so many more projects would never have happened. I am for Kickstarter.
All right. Well, there you go. Ichabod Games. Hopefully that covered your question. And I think we are ready to get into these game showcase. Thank you so much for your time and your.
So much.
Yeah, and it looks like we have in the chat on Twitch, we have the link to the contract and the publishing agreement breakdown. So check out the chat for that.
Yeah,
and
please watch it.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And again, people go follow Carly, keep tabs, and let's keep sharing this wonderful knowledge.
Yeah,
thank you.
Have a great festival.
Yeah, see ya.
Bye.
Okay.